In today's video, I'm going to take you through some easy edits using Lightroom on the iPad. So I put together just a little selection of some of my recent street photos into a little gallery. I've duplicated the photos, and then with some of them, I have reverted them back to their original formats. So we can see, for example, the actual edited version that I may have already published, and then the original file that it started from. Now, I do a lot of my work on the iPad, actually. It's such a powerful tool. I love working on it. It's super swift, super easy, and I even love how it syncs to all my other devices, so I can actually do editing on my phone when I'm maybe on the train or something, or just getting a beer after having been taking some photos. Anyway, let's dive in. So the first shot is one I took on bonfire night back at the end of last year on the beach near Edinburgh. And I really love this scene because we've got so many different things going on. Of course, we've got these people with their phones, just staring at their phones, despite all the other action that's going on. We've got the fireworks in the background, fireworks going on in the sky. And we've got this guy just sitting on his laptop, his face being lit up by the screen. I just think it's a really interesting shot. There's a lot to say about this. And if we take a look at the finished shot, we can really see that most of the heavy lifting is just in the black and white conversion. And that is easy to do. Almost all of my black and white conversions I do just using the built-in profiles in Lightroom. Now, these are so powerful. You can get some amazing black and white looks. You can get contrasty, punchy and moody and all kinds of really, really great black and white styles. And these are all just built in as standard to Lightroom. So no matter what other preset packs you may have been considering spending your money on, you've already got these. These are right there. And I think for this sort of shot, I might have used black and white 3 or actually 4 looks particularly nice and punchy. The other ones, this is quite a soft sort of low contrast look. Black and white 4 is one I've got starred. I have 3 and 4 starred. I really like how they look. So I'm going to go with 4. And if we go into our light tab now, I can see that the highlights are a little bright, but I don't want to pull those back too much because we will quickly start to lose that contrast. And I don't really want to do that. So I want them somewhere around here, -30. It's just sort of taking the edge off some of these really bright spots. I'm going to maybe bring the whites up just a little bit because that's going to be more visible around some of the other areas. And I might actually drop the shadows just a little bit as well, just to -10. Now, straight away, we can see that we've got a shot that is already much closer to our original. I do want to just go to our geometry tool, which is over on the right. And that is just going to allow me to click upright. And that's just going to bring this building in line a little bit. But I will just crop in, bring this top corner down a little bit so that we're sort of obeying the rule of thirds with this guy here. But otherwise, I think crop-wise, that's about it. I do think we have lost a little detail on this person's face because it's so bright. The light coming from this fire pit, and also this person here literally just sitting on their laptop despite all the cool stuff going on. So I think I'm going to bring in a brush, and I'm just going to brush in a little bit. That's a little too big of a brush actually. So brush, a smaller size, something like that. And I'm just going to brush in on these faces and on the hands a little bit, and then bring down those highlights a bit more, and then maybe just a little bit on that fire pit as well, and then done. And so that is already looking a lot better, I think. Now I might actually just add a little bit of clarity to the whole scene, because if I just pulse that up and down with a lot of shots, I wouldn't want to use this much clarity, but I think it suits this so well. It really brings out those details, and I actually really don't mind pushing this a long way, all the way up to +40. May even have a look at the dehaze and just add a little bit of that too, +15. It gives a crunchiness, but I think it works so well because this is already a high contrast black and white scene. I also took it at ISO 8000, so I kind of think that it generally works with this slightly noisy look that we've got, and I reckon I probably did that on the original as well. Yeah, actually I went much harder with the dehaze, less so with the clarity, but actually having a look at this original shot, it's actually quite dark, I think. I actually prefer already what I've done with this new edit. And I do always like the fact that I can return to edits like this and actually get something new from them each time. So something I always recommend doing yourself. But I'm going to move on, and I'm going to move on from this to this shot. This is one I took fairly recently in Edinburgh. I really, I love kind of this moment captured of this person just sort of having a last drag on their cigarette. There's something quite thoughtful about it. This was the original. So as we can see, you know, it's not that much different in terms of the picture. Obviously it's in color. So let's make a few of these edits, and straight away I want to go in again with the geometry and just make sure that these buildings are nice and upright. Actually, I'm just going to bring in our crop. I want to be careful with the crop here because I want to make sure that we're cutting off this sign, but we're not cutting off this building or the sort of the thing on top of it. So I want to be careful to put it in the right place. And then on the left hand side, you can see we've got this big tall pillar, which is sort of distracting. We don't need that to be in there. So again, I'm going to bring it down. Something like this. I think that looks great. So I'm going to press done. And of course, we need to do our black and white conversion. So I'm going to go back into my profiles and click through. And I actually think a less contrasty one is going to work better in this instance. I don't think I want it to be super punchy. This is just too dark. So I do think actually 4 again is my favorite. It would be between these two. But I think with black and white too, if we notice that that this person's face and like the color tones on the face and the clothes and the building, when it's been converted to black and white, they're all basically the same mid-gray. So there's not a lot of separation. Whereas in black and white 4, there is a little bit more separation. He stands out from the background that bit more. So I'm going to go with 4. But then I'm going to slightly increase the exposure. And I'm going to increase my whites. And particularly if I just pulse these again, you can see that it's really bringing out more detail on this sort of highlight on the front of his face, a little bit on the windows behind, which again is just helping him stand out from the scene, but it's also bringing out a little bit more detail on the cigarette smoke. And while I don't really love smoking, it's definitely a big part of this scene, this cigarette and the smoke that he's breathing out. So I want to make sure that that is certainly visible, if not actually emphasized. I might come back to that and do a little bit more, but for now I like this. I'm going to leave the highlights where they are. The shadows, I'm going to leave exactly where they are, and I might just give a little bit of extra contrast too. Now, I'm not sure there's more that I really want to do to this. The only couple of things I do want to do. First of all, again, I want to bring in a brush, and I'm just going to slightly paint this mask in on his face and a little bit on his hands. And again, I'm just going to increase those whites just to help carve out the details on his face. And I'm just going to bring in a radial gradient on the cigarette smoke. As I mentioned, it is part of this image. It is part of that story. And so I'm just going to up the clarity. As I pulse this, you can just see the difference it's making in that cigarette smoke standing out a little bit. And I might actually add a bit of texture to that as well, because it's smoke, so it kind of works quite nicely. Done. And lastly then, I'm going to go into the curves tool, put in a couple of control points, and I'm just going to grab the one on the bottom left, like this, and as I do, we can just bring it up, bring that black point up, and it just gives a nice filmic fade to our image. Maybe not that much, that's a bit too much. Something like this. So instead of having our black points dropping to absolute black, we've instead got this nice sort of filmic look to it that I actually think works super well for this sort of image, and I don't think is that removed from the original. In fact, I, again, prefer what I've done this time. I just think it looks a little bit brighter. Yeah, I like that a lot. Okay, let's move on then to our third image. Now, this is a really cool looking guy who I saw when I was out on a photo walk in Glasgow. He was sitting outside of his cafe, having a cigarette and a coffee, and beckoned me over. He saw me with a camera and said I should take his shot. And quite often when I'm doing my street photos, I all my photos are candid. I don't like people seeing me taking the photos. I don't like interacting with a scene. I like capturing a moment as it was. This one, the guy clearly had his photo taken a lot, and I wasn't going to pass up an opportunity to photograph someone who looked as interesting as this guy did, because we've got, obviously the amazing looking coat. We've got the cool headwear. We've just got the hint of a kilt underneath the coat, bare legs, sandals, and what I have noticed is vibrant yellow, neon yellow toenail paint and fingernail paint as well. Then we've got the glasses. Yeah, I mean, everything about this guy. He's such a cool guy. So this is what I did with my first edit, and I'm still really, really pleased with this. And there's a few things that I've done to achieve this. So first of all, of course, let's go to our geometry, because we can correct our uprights just to bring everything in line. And we certainly need a crop. Now, with this crop, there's a couple of things I want to be mindful of. First of all, I don't need this doorway. We just don't need that to be here at all. So I'm going to bring that down. Now, I do like that we've got the brickwork on here, so I don't want to bring this in too much so that we start going over this sort of window edge. But I also don't want to cut into the table leg here. So I'm going to be careful, bring it in about here. I think that's a good amount. Do I need to slightly adjust it? No, I think we're okay there. But the other thing I have noticed is actually we've got this slight reflection. If I just move it up, you can see that we've got the reflection of the roof of the building that would have been behind me in the window. So I don't want that. I find that quite a distracting little, almost like a line of highlight. So I'm just going to move the frame down to here. And I think that is a really good looking composition. So I'm going to press done to apply that. Now I'm going to go and have a look at some of my presets here, because I do love that on the iPad, on Lightroom, when you sync your presets to one device, it will sync across them all. And don't be afraid to use presets. Presets are amazing ways to quickly add a good base of a look, a good base of color to your image, and then you can do more edits on top. It isn't just about one click and applying another photographer's look to an image. They're really powerful ways of editing. You can create your own presets from your own things, particularly if you're working on your iPad or your phone. You're maybe on the go, you're maybe editing quite quickly, and so having those presets available is super powerful. Now, I often use these Visco presets, and I really, really like the look of them, and I get asked a lot where I get them from. Unfortunately, I bought them from Visco many years ago when they actually sold packs of Lightroom presets. They no longer offer them, and I don't know why. I'm asked all the time, and I don't know what to say. They don't sell them anymore, and I'm certainly not going to put these for people to download somewhere else, because that would be illegal. But if you're interested in them, then contact Visco, and maybe if enough people ask, they'll put them back on sale. But anyway, for now, one of my absolute favorites, I only really use 2 or 3 out of the whole lot, is A6 RAW. And it just gives a really nice base sort of filmic look to the image, over which I then apply a whole load of other edits. Now, first of all, I am just going to slightly bring down the highlights here. Actually, you know what? I'm not. I'm going to up the highlights and just bring down the exposure just a bit. The whole thing is a little bit bright, but I'm actually, you know what? Those highlights are a bit potent. But I'm going to have a subtle approach, because this is such a cool image. I just don't think it needs loads of work. I think it needs a bit of a light touch. So color mix. The background of this building is a little bit weird in its color. I think there's some purple hues because of the white balance. I don't want that. And in fact, yeah, if I slide my hues of the purple channel in color mix one way, it goes purple, the other way it goes blue. I'm going to leave it on the blue side. I'm actually going to take that a little further with the blue channel and drop that down a little bit more into the tealy blue. I also might up the luminance, in fact definitely up the luminance. If I just pulse that, you can see it's not just making the whole wall brighter, it's actually making like this area under the table and this bit, it really kind of adding texture and definition to the wall in a way that I wasn't quite expecting. So I'm going to go really bright with that, but when you go brighter with a color, it generally loses some saturation. So I'm going to up the saturation a long way as well, just to kind of counter that, so we've still got a nice rich tone. Now, looking at this coat, that's such a big part of the subject. That's going to be all in the oranges, I'm sure. Yes, it is. Look at all that. So I'm going to up the luminance just so it kind of helps give it a little bit more definition. I'm going to drop the hue a bit just so that it's a richer looking orange. And again, up that saturation. I do think that because we just changed the oranges, it's made his face look a little bit pink. And I think if I just go into the red channel and drop the saturation of those reds, yeah, if I just sort of move that up and down, you can see we can take him from looking like a strawberry to looking like a ghost. So I just think -20 with those reds just helps take the edge off what we did with the orange coat. It definitely is a little bit too bright, in particular on his hands and on this exposed bit of leg, because this is catching the sun. So I'm going to bring in a small brush and I'm going to paint a brush over his leg and foot and this bit of foot and this bit of hand. And we can just bring the highlights down on those. And in fact, you know what? I'm also going to do it on this bit of the chair back, painting in that minus highlight and a little bit on the table here, because those are very bright highlights. So I just want to make sure that we're balancing the scene and that our eyes are going to his face, which I think now they will be. So let's have a look at the before and after, before and after. This has been such a quick edit, but I really think it makes such a difference. Let's have a look at our original. Again, it's quite dark, but I think we've done very similar things with the colors. We've got this nice blue in the background, and the coat stands out quite nicely. Maybe I could go a little harder with the contrast here, actually, something like that. And maybe a touch of dehaze, actually, just to help give it that extra bit of pop. Maybe I'm going a bit too far, but you get the idea. I really like it. This is an image that relies so heavily on its color, so I definitely don't want to strip it of that. I want to make sure that those colors are bold, that this orange coat has got great color contrast against the blue of the wall behind it. As a result, I do think this is a really cool looking shot. So I'm really pleased with how that one is. And I'm going to move over onto what I actually think is quite an interesting photo, and it is this shot. In fact, is this the original? Is one of these is the original? This will be the original. And you can probably look at this and think, wow, this is like really overexposed on the left of the scene. And it sort of is, but what we've actually got is this great highlight coming in, but a very natural line of it. We've got the shadow in the top half, we've got a shadow in the bottom, and just this big beam of light cascading through and lighting things up. Now, this was actually taken on a phone, on the Xiaomi 14 Ultra, which I've just been reviewing for CNET, and I actually called it the best camera phone I've ever used. And those are words that I mean. This thing takes amazing photos. It's got a big image sensor, a huge dynamic range in its raw files, and that is exactly what I'm going to be using in this shot, because while it is very overexposed, there is a lot of latitude in these raw files to pull all of that detail back in a way that I don't think I have done with mobile phones before. So I'm going to start off our edits, and straight away, geometry, turn on our uprights just to kind of balance those upright lines on the sides of the business. Okay, on my crop, there's a few things I want to get rid of. We've got this little yellow sign that's a little distracting, and these people that are neither in nor out of the frame. So I'm going to pull this line in here until it almost meets this menu on the right. And then on this side, we've got this gaggle of people that we don't really need. We've got a big bright spot here that we don't need, and a big dark spot up here that we don't really need. But these two under these menus are quite interesting in our scene. So I'm going to make sure that my crop keeps them in. So I'm just going to move the frame in until about here, and then we can adjust. I'm going to move it down a little bit. I don't need to keep the road markings in, and instead I can just move it up and just have the hint of the curb just like this. I think that works really nicely for our composition. And in fact, I can just bring that in a bit more there and a little bit more on that side. So There we go. There's our crop, and now I can just do some more work elsewhere. And in this, what I'm really going to be doing is exposing for the highlights, and that's a really great way of creating shadows and contrast and drama in a scene. If you've got really bright highlights, then making sure they're exposed properly, that means that naturally everything else is going to fall into shadow. And that's what's going to happen here, because we have got such brightness. But instead of just pulling down the highlights and maintaining the shadows elsewhere as they are, we get what looks like a bit of an HDR looking scene, and it's fine, but it doesn't have the punch and the mood that we're looking for. So instead of leaving our highlights down, I might actually bring them up slightly so that it's really bright here. But then we just bring our exposure all the way down. And because we're bringing the exposure down as well, instead, we now get something that's got amazing shadows. I want this all to fall into darkness. I want here to fall to darkness. I really want this slash of light through the middle of the frame to be the whole point of this image. Maybe that's a bit too far. And actually, I could bring those highlights down a little bit. That is a bit much. But I think this looks really, really cool. And then in the color, I'm going to warm it up a little bit because it was a slightly warmer day. Maybe add a little bit of purple to those tints. And I want to use a linear gradient here because, again, we've got this great shadow line where there already naturally is a shadow. And so I can bring in a gradient that perfectly aligns with that shadow in order to darken this whole section down. But because it's already following a natural line of shadow, it's going to look very natural. It isn't going to look like we're just trying to darken an area that shouldn't be dark, because that already was a big shadow line. So it's really important when you're working with light this way in any editing that you actually kind of make it naturally fit to what was already there. If you're trying to add light into a shadowy area that simply wasn't there, it's just going to look weird. So it's about emphasizing what is already in the scene, not trying to put light where there wasn't any. So this works, I think, really well. I do think we've got slightly blown out shadows on, blown out highlights on the people over here still. So I'm just going to bring in a brush, slightly bigger size, something like this. And I'm just going to paint it here, a little bit over here, a little bit on this person, a little bit just there. Just gently brushing in that mask, and now I can just sort of pull down those highlights independently of the whole thing, which is great. A lot more control there. And so if we look again at before and our after, it's such a huge difference from this very overexposed shot to this, but we've kept in this amazing detail. Could go even further, a radial gradient maybe on the Hobbs sign like this. And I could just sort of up the clarity to give that a little bit more punch, maybe even a bit of whites as well, just so that Hobbs sign really stands out. I like this a lot. Maybe in the color mix, grab those yellows and make them a little bit of a warmer orange tone, because they're a little bit of a yellowy green. I don't like that so much. Instead, I quite like the color contrast between the green of the sign and the orange of the bricks. I can maybe pull down the luminance in the orange channel, which again is just going to help control the highlights on those bricks. But I'm not going to go too far with the saturation, because there's a lot of like skin tones and orange in the clothing and like this person's shoes down here. And if I start going too far with the orange, it's going to make everything look a little bit weird. So I might just put it at like +8 or 9, and that's just giving a nice little pop. Maybe these aquas. Oh yeah, the aquas in the signs. If I bring those up and down, you can see that's just allowing that Hobbs sign to stand out a bit more. +6 and a little bit of extra saturation. And I don't think this image needs anything else. But bear in mind, this was taken on a phone. So on a standard mobile phone in RAW mode. Look at that. What I've been able to achieve with a shot from a phone. Genuinely really impressed with this thing. If you are interested in great street photography from a phone, firstly check the review on CNET, but also let me know in the comments, because I would love to take this thing out and do some more stuff on it, but only if people actually are interested in seeing something like that. So let me know. So my last image then, and it is going to be another one that I took in London, and this is the edited version that you may have seen already. It's a scene that I really, really like. It's this cracking old boozer in London. We've got the lovely old wood paneling. We've got the signs of Vedette and the Guinness Stout on the wall. And I really liked this couple. They've got a great expression where you can just see they're looking up at something. I don't even know what. So there's a really nice sort of bit of mystery in this image, as well as like this beautiful lighting that's coming in and lighting them up. So I'm really pleased with this. I think it's a great little scene that I was very fortunate to have been able to catch. So let's have a look at the original, which, as you can see, really isn't that much different. A couple of things that I have done, of course, is do a crop. So I'm going to crop in, and what I actually noticed, if I just cancel that a sec, I wanted to crop out this seat in the foreground because I find it a little distracting, but I actually haven't cropped it out fully. It's made a little error. We've just got this little sliver of white here in the bottom of the frame, which is just messy. It just really shouldn't be there. So I'm going to try not to make that same mistake on our new edit, and I'm going to not make that mistake by immediately getting rid of it like that. And I'm going to pull this in from this corner, something like this. I want to make sure that I'm not cutting off any of the Guinness logo here, but I also really like that we've got one of the old classic Time for a Guinness or Lovely Day for a Guinness, the toucan advert here. So I don't want to cut that off either. And I think already that crop is pretty good. Again, I'm going to apply my A6 RAW preset because it just gives a lovely starting point for the scene. But of course, if you have got other presets, you can flick through them and just see if that gives you some other inspiration for how you might want to go with this. I mean, I do on the A5 one, it gives this nice cool tone to the shadows, which I do like. I think it looks lovely, but I'm going to add some of that in myself later. So I'm going to stick with the A6 one. And you know what? I don't really think this needs almost anything doing in the exposure. I could maybe sort of add to the mood by dropping the shadows a little bit, but I don't really feel it needs much. I might bring in a little radial gradient on the couple just to kind of increase the whites on them. And I also want to bring in one right up here to bring down those highlights just a touch, because if you look, they're a little overwhelming, but I don't want to go too far because then the panel goes, I think, quite weird looking. So I just think somewhere like -13 is a really good point between the two. And I just think that's helped balance that exposure. It's a subtle change, but I think it really works. So I do want to add in a bit of that cool tone in the shadow. It looks really, really nice. And I'm going to do that by going into color and then color grading, which literally does allow you to put different colors in the shadows, the midtones, or the highlights. So let's start with our shadows, move my hue up into the blues and increase the saturation. And as I do more and more, you can see that we are cooling down those shadows, adding in those blues until we get to a ridiculous point. So then we back it right off. And subtlety, I do think, is really important when you're using color grading. It can quickly go very odd. And so for me, I tend not to go much beyond sort of +15. We've added a really nice just coolness to these shadows that wasn't there before. We just have a look before and after. Lovely coolness. I'm going to have a look at what it looks like adding some warmth into our midtones. I think that's quite nice. Maybe a bit more on the yellow side, but I'm going to back it off a little bit and just have it about there. And what about in our highlights? Because we could put any color we want. Obviously, bright greens doesn't really do a lot, but Again, I think a little bit of warmth, but less of it. Something like there. And also maybe increase the luminance. It's a small set of changes that we've just done. But overall, I really like what it's done for this image. Now, bear in mind that I'm actually looking right now at a monitor because I'm recording 3 angles. I've got this one here, I've got my iPad screen, and I've got my overhead. And I'm recording all of them at once in one go through a Blackmagic Atom Mini Pro mixer. It's just meaning I'm not having to do a crazy edit afterwards. But I'm having a little look at a monitor that I've got, and the colors don't look particularly accurate for the version that I'm recording, which is probably what you're seeing. Looks a little contrasty and a little too vibrant. On my iPad, it actually looks a lot more subtle. So I just think it's the way that I'm capturing this video. It's maybe not entirely true to life, but hopefully I can put the actual stills in the image and it will look much more realistic. But again, you know, this is the before. It's already a really nice looking image. It needs very little doing to it. The light and the shadow that we've got is already there, so we don't need to mess around with the exposure. It's just about subtly refining it, adding those nice color toning, and I think we've got a lovely looking shot there, and I'm really pleased with it. There was our previous edit. You probably can't tell much difference, but there is one here. I've actually reduced the highlights more than I like on this back wall, whereas here we have got some of that light falling on them and it looks better. But overall, I am really pleased with how these shots look. Yeah, I really like this guy. I think it's such a cool little scene. And I just hope that having seen these, it goes to show just how easy it is to make these kinds of quick edits, even though these are dramatic edits, doing, you know, full black and white conversions, using masking. It's still, when you're working on Lightroom on the iPad, these are really, really quick things to do. So don't think that you can't do a full suite of edits on an iPad, because you absolutely can. This is the iPad Pro, but I actually do the exact same things on my iPad Mini, which has got much less power. And I also frequently do editing in Lightroom on my iPhone, particularly if I'm actually working on location, when I've been out and about shooting. Then maybe I stop for a bit of lunch. I will import the photos directly onto my phone and just start messing around, maybe applying a couple of presets and some quick edits, and then sharing to my stories or something. So you absolutely can do edits like that on devices like this. You don't need a big computer. You don't need the most powerful laptop. Yeah, it works super well. But that brings me to an end of today's video. It has been a little bit quick and rough, I suppose, but I do hope it's been genuinely helpful to see how I go about doing these kinds of edits on the iPad. If you are interested in more of my iPad editing or in Lightroom generally or anything like that, then do please let me know. I'm always interested to know what sort of videos you all actually want. So do please head into the comments and give me your thoughts. But for now, thank you so much for watching. If you have enjoyed this video, then do please hit that like button, and of course consider subscribing to my channel if you don't already, and I will see you next time.